Evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Ogier. I'm the Related Services Specialist for New York City Public Schools, and I'm thrilled to be here with you this evening to talk about how we can help students stay focused and manage big emotions. We know that supporting children with attention challenges and big emotions can be demanding and exhausting at times. I know this from my own experience as a parent, and I just want you to know that we see you, we hear you, and we appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us this evening to talk about these important topics, as I know everyone has very busy schedules. So, children who experience attention challenges, they often need information presented in a different way. And their environments often need to be structured intentionally to help them succeed. A lot of times, that's why the traditional way of giving information or setting up a room may not, work for your child if they're having these attentional challenges. Ongoing attention challenges can impact a child's ability to regulate their emotions. They often require additional support to develop coping strategies, build that frustration tolerance, and manage their emotions effectively to achieve positive daily outcomes. So, whether your child has an official diagnosis of, let's say, ADHD or another learning disability, or maybe they're having some attentional difficulties due to developmental delay, or they're just going through a difficult transition time, the good news is to accommodate all of these challenges, we approach it in the same way. If you notice that your child is showing persistent difficulties with attention and managing their emotions, it's very important that we teach them these accommodation skills early because these are things that they'll need to refine for themselves and be able to ascertain what works for them, what doesn't work for them, so that way they can continue to implement them throughout their life as they need to. So some of the things we're going to be talking about this evening is how to set up your home and set up visuals that can help your child sustain attention as well as maintain positive emotions. So, we're going to talk about setting up routines, um, weekly or monthly schedules, and checklists. So, children who have attention difficulties will benefit greatly from routine and visual reminders. So, having a schedule and also a clock that they can read gives them a parameter as to what you expect them to be doing during certain times. For some children, a weekly schedule would work better because monthly may be overwhelming. And you can post checklists for routines that you find that your child is really struggling with and that you have to constantly be reminding them of the same things over and over. Sometimes you may need multiple checklists, but if you haven't tried it, I would start with the one area that you really feel that you're struggling and constantly reminding your child of what to do, and then create a checklist for that and have them follow that checklist every time they need to complete a task. One of my first checklists I made for my children was an after school checklist because I was really, getting tired of just saying the same thing every single day. And now I could just direct them to their checklist. They know what they have to do in the different steps. I have pictures to remind them. And it did take some time for them to adopt it and be able to just do it automatically, but it really then gave them the autonomy to be able to follow their own routine and receive the support in a different way other than me just constantly telling them. Here is a picture of a monthly calendar. This is a calendar of one of just my kids' schedule, and I write everything that they need on there. What time they have different activities, what subject is a special for that day, especially if, let's say, it's library and they need to bring their library book. Again, it's another visual that I can refer a child to where they're not then coming to me for all the information. And it gives them that sense of ownership that this is what they need to do for a day, and they can set up their expectations for what needs to happen in the moment so they could get ready for that day. If you have a child that may have difficulty at nighttime, you might want to set up checklist or a social story for what's expected at nighttime, for nighttime routines. And then also what's beneficial is to talk with your children about what to do when things don't go as planned. Let's say if in your nighttime checklist, part of it is you sleep in your own room, and then when it's time to get up, you come and you could either uh, come to mom and dad's room or you can go downstairs. So that way you're already setting your child up with some options on what to do if they're not able to follow through with what you outlined in a checklist or set instructions for them. As we know, school life and school work doesn't end just when the school day ends, and homework can be a real pain point for our kids and as an extension for our families who have to work with them on completing that homework. So having a designated workspace in your home can be very beneficial. Um, so your child has a designated area where they would either complete schoolwork or reading. And in that area, you want to have different materials they may need. You'll see here in the picture, there's a whiteboard, there's Post-its, there's timers, noise canceling headphones. This will look differently depending on the age of your child. If you have a younger child and a lot of their work requires, let's say, crayons or colored pencils, you want to have the materials that they would need right there in that workstation. And you also want to have some fidgets available for them. It can be in a bin, it could be in a bag, because sometimes when our children are required to do sustained work that involves them to sustain their attention, it's beneficial to have a fidget or something that they could just kind of keep their hands busy as it allows them to really maintain that focus during the work. So while you have your designated workspace and some maybe fidgets available for them, you also want to allow for some flexibility. For example, your child may do their homework at the workstation, but then they may want to do their daily reading on the couch or in another area. So if your child is saying that, they want to move and go to the couch or a different area to finish part of the work, we do want to be flexible with that because a lot of times that additional movement allows our children to sustain their attention and not have um, such big emotions right away. You also want to go over the rules, when they're using that workspace or if they're using the fidgets, such as, the materials that are there, they stay there. They're not to be moved because that way they have them for the next time. Same thing with the fidgets. These are the fidgets that we're just using when we're completing our homework or additional schoolwork, or maybe you have an activity you want them to do. So that way everyone understands the expectations of those tools and those spaces. As I mentioned before, because so many of our children who experience attentional challenges um, have big emotions, and we're going to go into why that is a little later on in the presentation. In addition to these visuals that help them stay on task and help them be successful in completing whatever they're working on, it's also important to have visuals that support their social emotional health, right? Children who have attention challenges, they have those big emotions associated with those challenges. So a visual in your home reminds them that it's okay to do things in a different way and to ask for help when needed. And it creates a supportive environment for their style of learning because it's okay, as it says here, to make mistakes. Everyone does things differently, and the way they may choose to approach a task one day may not be the same way they do another day, and that's okay because they're young and they're still learning. And we want to make sure that, especially at home, we're creating that supportive environment and that we do have visuals that let them know it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to try again, and it's okay to need more time. You can put these visuals at their workstation. It's something you could even create and put on the fridge. You can keep it in their room. Something that they can just see every day would really be helpful for them. It's something that you could even create together if you want, um, if you think that would be helpful and would resonate more with your child. So our kids who have attentional challenges and big emotions, sometimes they also tend to have a lot of organizational challenges. And tasks such as getting ready, in the morning, that shouldn't take that long, sometimes seems like a huge feat for our children and also for parents. I know in my home, my kids have to get ready, get up 2 hours before they have to be at school, or they'll never be on time. One of them is rarely on time, even though she's up 2 hours earlier, because there's all these steps that kind of get in the way of what they're trying to do and they get distracted. So if getting their belongings together is a challenge in the morning, or they're close together. Um, Creating outfits and organizing them by day, or just hanging up full outfits together on a hanger, that can be helpful. That's something that your child can do with you, depending on their age. If they need assistance, it's something, if you have an older child, they can put together those outfits on their own and just have them ready. You can put them in one of these hanging organizers. If you don't have one, again, you could just put the whole outfit on a hanger so they could just grab it and go in the morning. That can save both of you a lot of time and sometimes heartache if that's a pain point. Um, Also, having all of certain belongings together in a bin or a bag, such as like all the winter belongings, as now it's getting colder, their hats, their gloves, their scarves, trying to keep everything in one space so that way they know where to go to retrieve those items. And it's not then creating frustration because they can't find it. Um, and a lot of times that tends to escalate. If your children do any extra curricular activities where it requires them to have uniforms or sporting materials, having them again all in one spot where you can set up a organization for them, it allows them to keep it together as well as knowing where to put things after they use it. And this can help save a lot of time for both parents and children. So a lot of times, we tend to give a lot of instructions for our kids. And if you have a child that has attentional challenges, they're not always hearing everything you're saying. They may get the very last piece of what you're saying, or the last set of instructions, but they may not always get all of it. And then you both are kind of left a little frustrated, because you feel like your child may not be paying attention, may not be following through on things that they should be doing. And then the child's frustrated because they didn't even hear all the directions because it was a lot of verbal directions coming at them, and they're not able to recall all of it. So, a way to help with that is by minimizing the amount of verbal instructions that we're giving our children. So try to simplify verbal directions by chunking information into 3 words. So you might want to replace your list of directions with a total of 3 words. It's say it in three. So if your full directions is okay, when you get in the house, hang up your jacket, put your folder on the table, and grab a snack. A shorter way of saying that is jacket away, folder on table, and snack. And if you use just 3 words, you would look at your child and say, jacket, folder, snack. It is very helpful to use this strategy when you're reminding your child of routines, that this is something they're aware of and is expected. And I will say that it does take a little bit of practice to do this. It's not something that you may feel comfortable doing right away, or have down right away. And it's okay to model that for your children, to maybe even give the full instructions and then break it down into just the 3 words. So, as parents and caregivers, you have valuable knowledge and insight into your child's triggers. When I say triggers, things that are really set them off, maybe just by the tone of their voice, by the way they're acting, that they're about to have really big emotions. So sharing that information with school staff can be helpful because it allows them to intervene quicker when a child is struggling. And it also builds consistency with that homeschool connection. Teachers are always doing their best to learn their students and what is supportive for them, what is not supportive for them, but that does take some time. And I know as a parent of a child who spends a lot of their day masking, they don't want teachers and their friends to know what their struggles are. They may think that everything's just fine. So it's really important to share with the school community and your children's teachers, what may be little telltale signs that they need extra help, or, what are some things you do at home that you feel could be beneficial in school. And we're going to discuss with a New York City public school parent, Natasha Scott. She's going to share her experience with building out that homeschool connection to support the attention needs of her children. Hi,
So,
Natasha. Thanks so much for being with us this evening. Can you describe your experience with your children when you first started building out that homeschool connection for your kids? What did that look like?
okay, sure. I just want to say greetings to everyone this evening. And as Crystal did say, that my name is Natasha Scott, and I am an occupational therapy supervisor for the New York City Public Schools. And it is my pleasure to speak with all of you all this afternoon. Just a little background, I do have twin 8-year-old daughters with a diagnosis of autism who are currently in the third grade and in the Horizon program at PS 91. I also have a 13-year-old son who goes to a non public school who has been recently diagnosed with dyslexia, with many years of struggle and not knowing what his needs were. He is currently now an honor roll student. And then I also have a 22-year-old who had an IEP and graduated from the New York City Public Schools and is currently still using all of the adaptations and accommodations to receive his bachelor's degree. So that's just a little background information. But to answer your question, Crystal, when I first started building that homeschool connection for my girls, and we're going to stick mainly pertaining talking to my girls about my girls tonight, right? My main goal was to just keep that consistent and honest, keyword is honest communication with anyone who was a part of my daughter's learning, right? So, what I get is a lot of bias in a sense because once people hear that I'm an occupational therapist, they automatically feel that I don't need to learn strategies. I know everything, and I don't need any resources as well, which is the total opposite, right? So, and also just to be very transparent, right? I had many emotions, okay? Whether it was um, uncertainty of whether or not they would collaborate with me, praying that they would hear what I'm saying and make sure that I feel seen as well too. I also wanted to provide them with the same sense that I am a team player and I am ready to work with them in any capacity to benefit my daughters. And thankfully that I was able to get into a rhythm of both verbal and written communication to keep that bond just flowing with anyone that works with my daughters.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you for bringing up your other children as well, because I know, when you have one child that has these difficulties or diagnosis or diagnoses in many of our cases, that is really overwhelming. And, many of our parents have multiple children, and we, struggle to have that balance of, meeting the needs of all of them. So I do
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that. Can you share a little bit with us about what does that homeschool connection look like now?
Okay, so currently my homeschool and connection, my approach has definitely evolved over the years. And this is like 22 years in the making, right? And it's still no cookie cutter for how that homeschool connection could look. Because due to me being a little bit more comfortable with communicating with the school staff and just knowing the needs of my daughters more, both academically and emotionally, the connection of the activities and the advice and the strategies always being strengthened every school year. A matter of fact, it could even be month to month because things can change.
Great. And what supports do you find that's both beneficial at home and in school?
Okay, I have many tips and tricks, but we're going to keep this very simple tonight, right? So, one tip that I have is I feel like it is very important to have at least a monthly check in with all of my daughter's providers and teachers. Now, I'm not saying have a parents teachers conversation with them. What I would say is build in that time to definitely speak to them, whether it be on any platform that you utilize, right? So I would say to ask them certain questions, right? Don't be afraid. Ask them questions such as, how are they doing? What resources that they may have, right? I would also think about what advice that they can give me as well too. Um, Another one that I have is ensure that your phone is set to get like notifications, whether it be through text message, through email, through robocall. I have, for example, Pupil Path or Google, the NICSA account, which is the New York City Schools account, and please sign up for that if you have not. I also organize my calendar with all the important school dates and ongoing events so that I can be abreast as to what my daughters have to do, you know? And then another thing is every week, preferably for me a Sunday, I will share pictures and videos with the providers and the teachers to show them what my girls have done for the weekend, right? So this can be anything that they did, and I have gotten positive feedback because this allows them to help with their expressive language, their ability to recall details, explain the activities, and it's a great conversation starter as well. It helped the staff also to get to know my daughter's likes and dislikes. Another tip that I have is I do ask the providers to send home any activity sheets that they may have, right? And within the activity sheet, they do tell me what the activity is and how well they did. And I also can get copies made so that I can carry over that as home to at home as well too. Another tip is to ensure that you make your presence known in the school as much as possible. I know that we are all busy, but whether it be through volunteering, attending PTA meetings, going on school trips, or even some school events, this also gives you a chance to build a rapport with the staff as well too. Another thing is setting up your home environment, as you spoke about, Crystal, is also very important in my house as well too. So, for example, they do have their own tables and chairs, and on that, I tape. For example, things that they may have in their classroom, like a ruler, they have all their supplies next to them so they don't have to move around too much if it's unnecessary. I have a seat cushion if needed. I have a weighted lap animal. I have homemade sensory bottle, and you can definitely, oh, and also they can get the sensory stickers. So just in case they need to touch while they are doing their homework or reading, they have that sensation as well to refocus them. You can always ask the staff in the school to send you maybe links to purchase these items, or maybe you're a DIYer like me and you like to make certain things. There are definitely different websites and low cost ways of making these sensory items for your child to focus more. And last but not least is I do have signed the media consent form for my daughters, and I allow the teachers and the therapists to take pictures and videos of them so that they can share them with me so that I can see what they're doing and carry over any strategies that are being taught. And it just warms my heart too to see what they're doing in school as well. That's just a couple of my tips and tricks I have for you.
Thank you so much for sharing those. Um, and for sharing, how you clearly have set days that you reach out to the staff, you set a monthly reminder for yourself, um, because we also need those supports layered in, right? So that we can follow through for our kids. And if you can give one little bit of advice for a caretaker for a child who's newly diagnosed and doesn't even know how to start with that homeschool connection, what would you say to them?
Okay, my main advice would be to prioritize your needs, the child or children's needs, and your family needs. That is very tough, and that'll be the first step, right? Next one is please ask for help, whether it be through the other parents, the school, anything, please ask for help because I want you to know that you're not alone in this, right? And if one form of support that you're trying or strategy isn't working and you've been trying it multiple times, let's change it up. Nothing is wrong with that. There is no such thing as failure, right? And I'm going to close this out with my three C's of being consistent, have open communication, and carryover is key, right? And this is exactly what I feel is needed for that homeschool connection.
Thank you
I would
so
just
much, Natasha.
I would just like to say thank you again to Crystal and the Doll family, and I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with our families. And, as we spoke about earlier, we're going to talk now more about how do we support and manage those big emotions, because children of all ages often need support in managing their emotions. It is something that we need to intentionally teach our children, and it's so important that we model for our children. But children with attentional challenges can find navigating environments that have high cognitive demands extremely exhausting. Something that I'm thinking about that they're in all day is school. School is really tough for our kids who have attentional challenges. And they may feel little to no sense of accomplishment after they complete a task because of the amount of effort it took to complete it, it overshadows the outcome. So instead of feeling pride, they're often left in a cycling through those difficult emotions, such as they have a brief relief that it's finally over. They have grief that it took so long for them to do it. Um, they get angry or enraged that it didn't have to be this hard. And then they feel shame that it was this hard. And unfortunately for our kids, this is truly a cyclical process that they go through as they navigate difficult activities that makes it hard for them to sustain attention. These big emotions keep building, and they're almost triggered by how tough something can be because of the emotions they're going to feel from that. And this ongoing emotional toll can quietly erode at a child's motivation, their self-esteem, and also their sense of belonging. So supporting them means acknowledging not just their effort, but also the emotional weight of that effort. It's important to let your child know that as they're working on these different accommodation skills and different scaffolds of support that they need to implement, that the tasks will become easier and that it won't always take so long and it won't always feel so hard. And we want to let them know that it is completely okay to feel frustrated sometimes and angry sometimes. We just don't want to stay in that space for too long because that takes away from what they're really trying to accomplish in the moment. Also, you and your child can benefit from knowing which activities help calm them down when they're feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. So, these are conversations that you may want to have with your children, not necessarily in the moment when they're having those big emotions, but after, once everyone's calm, it could be later on that day. For some kids, it's got to be the next day because it takes them, maybe the full day to get over that. But to talk about What are some things that they can do that helps make them feel calm and relaxed when they're feeling frustrated or overwhelmed? Um, and then try to remind them to do those things the next time they have these feelings come on. So, as I just mentioned, in this cycle, it affects our children's self-esteem. And a lot of times, kids that have attentional difficulties and are experiencing these big emotions, they start with a lot of negative self-talk. So, some things you can say to your child if you notice your child's having a lot of this negative self-talk is, wait, would you say that to a friend? That is something I often say to one of my kids, and their response is no, because I'm a good friend. And then I always say, well, then why would you say these things to yourself? Or you could say, let's press pause on that thought. Can we look at it together? Or I hear how frustrated you are. Let's try a different voice for a second. Or that sounds like a harsh inner critic. Can we talk back to it? So, some things that you can say to anchor the moment for a child of what they're going through is you just finished something really hard. Before moving on, let's take a minute to check in with your body, your emotions. This helps you feel strong and in control again after a tough experience. It's fine to remind them that it was hard and you still did it, and that deserves a moment. Even if it's a task that you may not think is incredibly challenging, but it does take your child a lot of effort to complete, it's so important to acknowledge that effort that they put into it, because it really helps their overall social emotional health and well-being, and they feel like they're being seen for who they are and all the work that they're putting in to try to accomplish these tasks. So if you have a child that you feel is constantly in that negative self-talk, or maybe they're always comparing up to expectations that may be unrealistic for something they haven't mastered yet, I would encourage you to have them compare down. Try to identify two different ways that they can compare down. So now we're going to talk about how we know managing big emotions for your child is a challenging task, and it can be frustrating and exhausting for caregivers. Um, when our children are in it, it's a lot to take on to try to you yourself stay calm as you're trying to get them into a calm state. And we're going to talk with Monica George. She's a mother of two New York City public school students, as she's going to share her daily practices for managing big emotions at home. So, Monica, can you share what you feel causes your child to have big emotions?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Monica George. Thank you to Crystal. Thank you to the Dow family. Thank you to all the families out here that are joining us for this. I do have two children that are they go to New York City public schools. I do want to talk about specifically my 13-year-old daughter. She's in middle school at a public school here in Brooklyn. She's 13 years old, so that's the sweet spot for big emotions, just by virtue of being in middle school and, you know, puberty and the whole nine. But she also has ADHD combination type, so that adds a little bit of a layer to the complexity, and also a little bit of background for me. I too am an occupational therapist, and I'm fortunate that I had that. But when I'm with my kids, I'm mom. I'm not leaning into being a therapist. I'm leaning into being a mom, and to reiterate and to echo what Natasha said earlier, we don't have all the answers when I'm, working with my children and struggling through the same things. It's not me being the therapist looking at them clinically. I'm looking at them through the eyes of a parent, thinking, okay, what can we do? So to get back to my daughter, um, she has three areas where she has really big emotions. Number one, of course, hormones, because puberty, the emotional response is naturally bigger, it's faster, it's less predictable, and that ADHD layer on top of it makes things a little bit more difficult because what parts of her brain are affected by ADHD overlap with emotional control, and it's just more sensitive to stress. One of the biggest things that causes my daughter to have big emotions is her sensitivity to perceived rejection. So, especially at 13, you feel criticized when someone didn't mean it. She's easily embarrassed. She can have an intense emotional experience when, like, if there's a conflict, like she can cry, she can shut down, she can lash out. And she has really big reactions to like friendship or sibling issues. And one of the
Okay.
other areas, the biggest area also for her, is that she gets overwhelmed and she gets overwhelmed in the work of being in middle school and the work of managing her emotions throughout the day. She has a bigger academic load. She has bigger demands that require that much more organization. So she has to work twice as hard to keep up everything and hold it together at school. So she's overloaded, she's irritated, she'll have an outburst. Sometimes she'll shut down and not necessarily in that order. So she'll come home and crash out or collapse. And I recognize this now, but like she would melt down at home because home is her safe space. She can't do it at school. So she holds it together as long as she can. And then she gets home and then it comes crashing down. And I help her get through that.
Yeah, so this is
Mhm.
a story I know all too well
Yes.
with keeping it together at school and then the unraveling, as I like to say, my house at home.
Mhm.
So what do you do to hold your child accountable, right? When they're having these big emotions? Because like you said, sometimes she'll have an outburst and sometimes our children may say or do things that are not acceptable, right? Or appropriate when they're in that space. What are some things you do to hold her accountable when that's happening?
At the end of the day, we have to give her time and space. It's very difficult for most people, especially, my daughter to kind of pause before she reacts. And so it takes her a little bit longer to calm down when she's upset. So the biggest thing for me is to give her time and space. And when we're at home, I want to say we do have the luxury of giving her that time and space to get through the storm. I do validate her emotion and I try to separate the emotion from the behavior. I will share with her. I'm like, it's absolutely okay to have these feelings, but what's not okay is how you're yelling about it. So I want to make sure that she knows that her feelings are valid. You absolutely can have an emotional response, but how you work through that response is what we have to do better at. Um, I will go into my neck rolling like, what you're not going to do is yell at me,
Mm.
but she works through it. What I also recognize with my daughter, and I guess with anyone, you can't address it in the middle of the storm. What do they say? A confused mind says no, an angry mind just shuts down. There's nothing going in or out when she's in the middle of that. So we have to give her a minute to get to a space of where she can process and speak and think logically. So in that moment, it might be very short, very simple phrases in your room now. Go. Very simple. I'm not talking at her. I might just give her enough to understand what she needs to do. And nine times out of 10, she doesn't even need me to tell that to her. She will go in her room and crash out. And then when she's in the mental space to speak on it, it might not be that day. It could be the next morning. It's like, yeah, so what happened yesterday? And she goes through the cycle. What you shared earlier with that cycle is real. Like she's realizing that it didn't have to be that way. She's
Mhm.
mad at herself because it took so long. She's mad at herself that it didn't have to be that difficult. And then she feels like this energy of like almost shame or embarrassment because she knew that she made it harder than it had to be. But we talk through it. I'll ask her, so what happened? What do you need? What
Yeah.
maybe what's a better way of handling that? And usually she can come to that point. She can actually articulate well, maybe next time I'll just ignore it. Or next time I'll organize myself a little better. Next time I won't, I'll pack my bag first, you know,
Yeah.
and I
Thank
validate her. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, because you
Mhm.
actually answered our next question is
Oh.
like, what do you do to make that connection, right, between those underlying areas and those big emotions she's having? So tell me, Monica, what do you do to stay in a calm state when your child is having these big emotions and needs your help now to help her get calm? Because we're not always, it happens at any time. It's not always happening when you're, at your best.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. It is a full-on work in progress because for me, like first of all, to let everyone know here, her apple isn't falling that far from my tree. So I do understand, and I've been there, and I have to be the best mom that I can. So in that moment, really it's practice. The one thing that I know that I do, and I consciously do this, is I take that deep breath before I react. I consciously breathe in. I processing, okay, do not yell at her. You know, I just need to pause and count so that my words are not reactive and that my
Mhm.
words do not escalate. It's very easy for my tone or any of us. We get frustrated, our tone escalates the problem and it doesn't de-escalate. So in that moment, I cannot react with, what did you just say? I
Yeah.
have to shift my mindset. And so the deep breath for me and to process what I'm going to say before I say it is really the key for me personally.
Thank you so much. We
Monica
are going to
and
now get,
Crystal. I wanted to just jump in super quick, Monica and Crystal, because Monica, you touched on a point that is so important for all of our families to really take home, which is that when a child is experiencing big emotions and they appear and it looks like they're out of control, or they're just not listening, that is not the time to try and reason with that child. That is not the time to try and let them know, hey, you're being disrespectful, or I don't like the way you're speaking, or this is not okay. That in those moments, the most important thing is that your child is safe and you keep
Yes.
them safe. And as Monica so brilliantly said, in a calmer moment, that's when it's a great opportunity to talk to the child about, hey, what happened last night or yesterday? But in the moment, um, it's like for us as adults feeling really anxious and really feeling strongly about someone and someone saying, oh, you're fine, just ignore it, just walk away or whatever. That just doesn't work for us. And in those moments, it does not work for our children. So Monica, thank you so much for calling
Oh,
that out because that's so important.
thank you. Thank you.
yeah, so just a few more things with how to provide that social emotional support. We want to start off either the day or the week with a positive affirmation. Encourage breaks with your children. They don't always want to take a break, especially when they're in it, but you know they need a break. So really encourage them to take that break. And if they're really struggling to get control of their negative emotions, work on identifying positive emotions. Three positive future emotions to promote are pride, compassion, and gratitude. And always make sure that you're also practicing self-care. It's so important as caregivers to take care of yourself and that we model this so we can be prepared to meet the needs of our children. And as you model it, it involves for your child, you want to see how you're feeling and actions you take to get to a calm and happy state. Your children will internalize this and be able to do it for themselves. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It has been a pleasure speaking with you about these topics.